Okay, everyone, thank you very much for watching or listening today. And today I have a very, very special guest on the show. Very excited to talk to this man about his life and career. Craig Harrison, author of The Longest Kill, former professional sniper, former corporal of horse in the Blues and Royals, a cavalry regiment with the British Army, who is known for formerly holding the world record for the longest sniper kill at 2,475 meters, 2,707 yards. So that's definitely something you don't hear every day. He's most well known for serving in Afghanistan, but also served in Iraq and the Balkans as well. More than 80 confirmed kills. As I mentioned, published author, has been featured extensively in the media. But this isn't just a story today about war and about violence. This is much deeper than that. Today's story carries a powerful social message about the struggles that veterans face, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and more. The effect that violence has and war has on the people who take part and the people who are affected by it. Craig is a much-loved figure and seen as a war hero by many, rightly so. And today we're going to be talking about his life and career and his amazing story. So, like I said just now, Craig, it's enough of me talking about you in third person there. Thank you for coming on the show, and appreciate you making the time. Thank you.
No worries, Liam. It's nice to be on your show.
Absolute pleasure. So, getting into it from the beginning, like we were talking about setting this up, I think it's a good idea to go back in time a little bit to sort of where it all started for you. Not so much literally where it started in terms of when you were born, but more where that seed of an idea to join the army and where that ambition first began, where you first got that idea. So, take us back to where that all started for you, please.
Well, I used to I've been riding horses since I was about 5 years old, and I wanted to get a trade when I was growing up. And my granddad always told me, you need to get a trade, because in Cheltenham, where I lived in near the Cotswolds, there wasn't much to go on, job-wise or job spec-wise. So from an early age, I wanted to join the army. And because I loved horses so much, I wanted to join the Household Cavalry because of the ceremonial side, the cavalry side. And also they had farriers as well. So I thought I'd combine the two, horses, and get a trade to be a farrier. So that was the whole idea of me joining the British Army.
Amazing. So that's where it all started for you. Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, in terms of this, I've also come across the fact that you have a bit of a sporting background as well. So you mentioned horse riding, but I've seen in other interviews where you mentioned swimming, you mentioned obviously shooting as well. Was that where it started for you, where you first learned to shoot and to use your gun?
Yeah. Well, I used to do triathlons. So it's like running, shooting, riding, and swimming. So to do... and we were only shooting air rifles. Well, no, sorry, air pistols at targets. So my riding sort of came from there, my fitness through swimming and running. So you could say I was born and bred for the army, really, at a younger age, and the shooting came second nature as well. I just had a good eye, as they say. So it all stems from there. I did that for many years when I was younger.
Yeah, amazing. Some amazing achievements there. And of course, it makes sense as well, growing up in that sort of area with the outdoors and that sort of natural environment as well. I suppose that factors into to what came later as well.
Yeah.
So brilliant. Okay. Now, with this, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, and I'm sure you've told this part of the story many times. But when the initial ambition to become a sniper, when you've spoken in some other interviews, it sounds like it wasn't something that you totally planned on, or it was sort of a sequence of steps to get there. But can you share with us basically how that came to be? How you actually came to become a sniper in the end?
Basically, the Household Cavalry split into two. So it's split into the ceremonial side and the armoured side. And the armoured side do forward reconnaissance. So they're light armoured tanks like Scimitars and Spartans, but they've changed it now to a new vehicle called Ajax. So it's a slightly bigger reconnaissance vehicle. But in my day, it was Scimitars and Spartans and Sultans. And it was so forward reconnaissance is we push forward to gather information of lifetime information of the battlefield and then send it back for the rest of the army to push forward or to get enough intelligence on what the enemy's doing. and they decided to let snipers into the ROC, which is the Royal Armoured Corps side. And when I found out about that, I thought, well, I'll give it a go, and I was one of the first snipers in the regiment, and I sort of excelled from there, when I was on the course. When I did my course, it was full of the guards, it was full of paras, and I was that only household cavalryman there. But I sort of showed them how it's done, really.
Amazing. So you were pretty much a natural at it then, by the sound of it. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I was a natural. I did struggle at some things, but through time, I got better and better.
Well, practice it does make perfect in
It
that
does
way.
make perfect, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, for those of us that that don't know necessarily how it works inside that, in terms of the sniper training and that aspect, I'd imagine there's sort of a training process that you have to go through. Is it? I'd imagine it's probably quite extensive as well. But in your own words, can you share with us a little bit about that practice? That we were just mentioning, how it
Well, the
works.
course, the sniper course itself is 9 weeks to 9.5 weeks. I'm not sure if they extended it a bit now to like 12 weeks. But in that 9.5 weeks, you do a shooting phase first for the first 4 weeks, from short range, mid range to long range. And there's different badges that you need to pass. So you need to pass the mid range, short range, and then the badge test to pass the mid range to long range. Once you've passed that, then you go on to the sniper phase. But if you fail the shooting phase, you cannot go on to the sniper phase. And if you fail the sniper phase, you can become a sharpshooter in your regiment, but not a fully qualified sniper, because obviously you've passed the shooting. So once you've passed the shooting, you go on to the snipers, and then that's camouflage and concealment, that's navigation, and then it goes into more depth about camouflage and concealment in itself, and that's when you become a better sniper. And then it's a mixture of the shooting and the snipering, and combined to that, you become a sniper.
Amazing, amazing. It's an amazing insight into how it works on the inside. Before we go sort of full throttle into the military side of things, which we will in a moment, I also I skipped over this, but need to give this a mention. I saw it on your podcast with James English, or I heard rather on there, that you did a bit of boxing or a bit of fighting back in the early part of your career. This I might be further forward in the time scale now. This might be maybe when you first joined, but I didn't know that until listening to his podcast. I do a lot with boxing and with the fight world, as you may have seen when we were talking about this. So I just want to give that a quick mention. Was that just for fitness, for some extra cash, or what sort of thing was the motivation?
Yeah, for extra cash. Yeah, I when I was on the mounted side, obviously you got to think that I'm a young lad, 16 years old, joining the British Army. You pass out of training, you get to the regiment, you're 17 years old. And I was a quiet lad, I was a country lad. So I've never seen the bright lights of London. And then you get a wage packet and you become a weekend millionaire, and I got sort of the friends that I made took me down the wrong route. And I started prize fighting for money. And I started doing it in London. And then I went outside London and started doing it in bits and bobs, around the country. And I was, you do 3 fights a night, for a bit of money. So and that's where it all stemmed from, really. And that's one reason I got sent to Windsor from the mounted side, because I was just going down the wrong route and I didn't want to get kicked out of the army. So I'd rather, concentrate on my career, hence me going to Windsor.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense, but it's just good to give that a mention. I know a few guys who do different types of prize fighting, or various amounts of legality, in and around London and other places. So it's just interesting to give that a mention as well.
Yeah, no worries.
Your career. So
not my proudest moments.
Yeah, well, but we've all got to do these things sometimes to
Yes,
to make.
yeah.
When you're that sort of age, you do try things, and you look back sometimes and what was I thinking there? But that's part of life, isn't it? Really. So it's
Yeah, for sure.
part of
All
life.
part of growing up and maturing.
Yeah, very much. I agree. So, we were talking about the training just now, the sniper training, how that works and everything. Obviously, as you sort of progress through that, there's a time, when it basically becomes real. Where you get sent out on your first mission. And is mission the right word? I mean, is that what you call it? After you become qualified as a sniper,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
actually.
you get different missions and different taskings, shall we say? But yeah, you get different missions to go on and different tasks to do on that mission. Because the mission itself involves other entities around you, and your task will be to do something in that mission. So that's how it works.
So it works, okay. So you sort of get called up, and obviously, you've joined up, you've gone through the training, you're obviously enjoying it by the sound of it, and you've obviously got the aptitude, the natural sort of aptitude for it, as well. So when it becomes real, when that first mission became real, sort of on the build up to it and things like that, if you get where I'm coming from, what's sort of going through your mind with that? Is there sort of nerves? Is there sort of excitement that I want to get out there and see what this really is, or do you know what I mean? In that sort of early phase, before you've actually done it, what's going through your mind at a time like that? If you get where I'm coming from with this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, basically, the role of a sniper is to, same as reconnaissance, is to gather lifetime information of the battlefield. So your job is not to go out and kill someone, not to go and shoot someone. Your job is to go out there and observe. That's your first primary role. And then your secondary role is, if necessary, to take that target out,
Mhm.
So one of my first roles were in Iraq, and it was in the desert, and I had to just sleep in the desert with my number two and observe these compounds. And it wasn't necessarily to take the targets out. We were just there to observe. So on that mission, my task was to observe,
Mm.
and that's how it works, and then if necessary to take that target out, but it never came to that,
Mm.
for the information that we had, it never came to me to take the target out, which I'm grateful for, because it's not all about killing.
Mm. Absolutely, and I'm glad we can clarify that as well for people who are not as in the know, because they'll be both watching this, people who know all about the army and people who don't. And this is something else I wanted to talk to you about, is in your role as a sniper, that it's amazing, when I was researching this, some of the skills you have to have in terms of sort of a heightened awareness of your environment, how you're living sort of in the wilderness for long periods of time. It's a totally different lifestyle that I don't think a lot of people realize. And I would like to touch on that as well, because it's sort of a very unique, very fascinating skill set, I must say. And when I was researching this, I realized just how much comes into it, even though you know it's a lot. But when I was researching this, I really thought, wow, in terms of being out in the wilderness for days at a time, and you guys not speaking to each other for periods of time, not giving your position away, all of this type of thing. So I'd like to get into that a little bit in terms of what it's like, because obviously it's not all about killing, and hopefully we put that across. It's an aspect we'll touch on, but in terms of the lifestyle, can you share with us a little bit about that, in terms of what it's like when you are observing, the patience you have to have, and just
Yeah,
you
it's not all glorified. Like being a sniper, you think, "Wow, I'll be a sniper."
know,
You're in the shit. You're in, you're in the shit. You're hungry. You're thirsty. You can't move. You got to be on the scope constantly. You get tired. You catnap. It's not all glorified. Then you got your best mate wiping your ass when you go for a shit, because you can't move, because the position you're in is so tight and small, and you have to do everything by hand signals and not talk to each other. Or if you talk to each other, it's got to be really close to his ear, because you don't want to be seen, because there is certain things, there's movement, texture, shine, silhouette, surface, and these things will give your position away. So the slower you are and less movement you do, less chance for you getting found that's the old idea, you know.
it's amazing. I mean, it's not even a question of saying, but it is just incredible, and the patience and the concentration and the discipline, among other things, that it must take for that is just
Well, I used to make stories up. If I'm observing a target, I'd make stories up to keep my mind occupied. I'll give the target a name. I'll call him Bob Bill or something like that, you know, just to give him a character in my own head, so it keeps me occupied in my own head, you know, and that's how I used to do things.
Yeah, amazing. And how long was it that that you'd be observing certain targets? I mean, this is something that just goes on for days at a time?
Yeah, it is. A sniper on the ground should be sustainable for 40 to 72 hours on the ground. So you could be in a prone position for 72 hours. The longest I've been in a prone position is a week. But you got to keep your limbs moving because you get stiff, you get cramp, you're cold, you know, for being on the ground for that long period of time. But at the end of the day, it's your job and you need to do it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it is still amazing, the mindset that you must have for that as well, and it gives people a feel. I mean, because obviously with this, some people will have read your book and they will know, and they've seen interviews, and some people this will be sort of the first exposure to it. It's good to touch on both sides of it. Obviously, that's the lifestyle aspect, and when it does come to taking a target out and that side of things, I don't necessarily want to dwell massively on this side of it, because I know some things will probably be difficult for you to talk about more than others, and I respect that. Also, for the completeness of an interview, we need to touch on it a little bit in terms of how you frame that, because obviously you're protecting your country, you're defending your country, you're protecting the other people who are out there as well. Not only your men but other people. Which, when you describe the longest kill itself, you touched on, which we'll get to in a minute. So there's all of these sorts of things, but it is still taking life at the end of the day. So how would you sort of mentally frame it? And like I say, I don't know how easy this is for you to talk about, so I'm very respectful of that. But just anything you'd like to share about how you frame that process, basically.
Yeah, no worries. My first engagement was with a guy that was we called it dicking or scouting. We had a mobile MOG, which is a mobile operational group in the desert, and it combines of nearly something like 30 vehicles, and we sort of move around the desert doing different tasks. And every time we stopped, we would get mortared, and they were getting closer and closer. So we'd move on to somewhere else, and then we'd get mortared again, and then again and again. We kept more, and we figured out that we were getting scouted by a guy on a motorbike with a radio. And it got to the point where I had permission to take that target out to reduce the chances of keep getting mortared. So we waited, and the MOG stood still. We saw the guy on the motorbike, and I took that target out. And that was my first engagement that I ever done as a sniper. And you automatically think, fuck, I've just killed someone. You feel like you're in trouble. You feel like you're going to get a tap on the shoulder going, can we have a quick word with you, mate? You're in trouble for killing someone. But at the end of the day, it wasn't like that, and it took me a good 5 days sitting on the end of my camp cot at night thinking, fuck, I've just took somebody out, to get the reality of that out of my brain. And then you become it sounds quite rude, but you come quite numb to it after a while, and it just turns into a job where you have to do your job, when you have to do your missions, where you have to do your tasks, and that's what it comes to after a while. And you sort of like you put him in boxes in your brain, and you store it in the back. And when I got blown up in Afghan, it was like that wall got shattered and everything came spewing out. All the targets that I'd done, all the missions that I'd done, and I couldn't control it, and hence me having PTSD, complex PTSD, and that's where that stemmed from. So,
yeah, it's quite something to get into the mindset, and obviously, in many ways you're doing the right thing, but it's also how you frame it, and it's good to get into that. I saw another interview where you described this as sort of a wall of ice or a sheet of ice in one interview, which I thought was a fascinating description. And just to touch on that, is that sort of how you frame it in terms of blocking some of these things out?
Yeah, because you think you're in 1 minute you're in a battlefield, 1 minute you're fighting, the next minute you're at home hoovering, washing up, mending the washing machine, walking the dog, and you've got to separate that from reality, really, and you've got to work with that. And that's what I used to do. I just used to separate my work from my private life, but obviously when I got blown up, it never happened like that. And it sort of mingled into my private life as well. And that, it was hard. Yeah, it was difficult,
I can imagine it would be. And we'll touch on that shortly as well, because that's a very valuable part of your story for a lot of other veterans out there, a lot of other people who served in any capacity. We'll touch on that. Before we touch on that, to give a mention to a story that I'm sure you've told many times, and I know we're probably moving forward in time with this. Obviously, when you broke the world record and the longest kill and this side of it, I'd like to touch on that briefly, and then we'll get into some other aspects of things. Like I say, it is a story people probably ask you about it all the time, I'd imagine. But still, in your own words, can you share with us what happened on that day? How it all went down, breaking the world record. I don't think you even realised at the time that you'd broken it.
No.
When I was researching this. But again, anything that you'd like to say about that. I don't have a question about this particular part of the day or this particular thing, but just your experiences in your own words would be great.
Yeah, so what it was, like I said, the mission was for a patrol to go into the village to flush out the Taliban, and that was the mission. And my tasking was on that mission to give overcover watch and watch them go in, and if they got into any trouble, to take out relevant targets. And I could see, as the patrol was going into the village, I could see all the Taliban queuing up, waiting to attack the patrol as they went in. And you get a thing called a kill zone. So as soon as they hit this kill zone, the Taliban opened up, and then they sort of like started taking a lot of casualties in this patrol. And so I started taking key targets out from the position I was. And then I noticed a glint in the far distance, and I couldn't work out what it was. So I had a quick look, and to me, it looked like a bloke with a radio. Now, what they had a thing called, what was it called? ICOM. It's an ICOM chatter. So the interpreter that I had the same frequency as the Taliban. And I was going to them, what's going on. I was talking to my interpreter, who's obviously translating to me and what the Taliban are doing. And obviously they were getting orchestrated by somebody higher and from somewhere else. And I couldn't work out where it was. But then I figured out from this compound, the guy with the radio had the same view as me. So he was orchestrating the attack and what was going on. So I fired it in the morning. I fired 9 shots, and it's called bracketing, because I knew it was out the capability of my rifle. But if I could angle it in certain ways, I could probably get a decent shot on. And I wasn't there to take the target out. I was just wanted to scare him. So if you had a bullet come and hit a brick wall, you would get your head down. And that's what I wanted to achieve. So I fired my first shot. I saw where it fell. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th shot hit the compound wall. And it made a massive, because the compound wall was made out of mud and like cow shit and straw and God knows what. And it made a massive sort of like dust cloud. So the guy got his head down. And on the ICOM chatter, it said, "I can't direct you anymore. I'm getting shot at from somewhere." Well, that somewhere was from me, so I knew I had the right guy. So the patrol was getting extracted out. And what I'd done, I had 3 vehicles behind me with my lads in. So I told them to go into the kill zone to act as a buffer between the patrol and the Taliban, so their patrol can get their wounded out and their dead out. And so I set my vehicles down, and they were engaging the Taliban. And from my side, I noticed a Taliban gunner was by a pump about 600 yards away. and I couldn't figure out what he was doing. Now, we always got taught when you're training, it takes 20 minutes. Always think 20 minutes in your head for the Taliban to flank you from where you are. Now, they didn't know where I was, so I wasn't concerned about that. But then I noticed what he was doing, and I thought he was a marker for the Taliban to come round behind and find me. So I took that target out, and then I noticed what he had done. He had knocked the water pump off, and he had flooded the irrigation field. So the three vehicles I had in the kill zone were now stuck in the mud, because the water was just gushing in. And as I kept on observing what was going on, all I saw was spray of water, and my lads' head were all getting down. I couldn't figure out where the shooting was coming from. So I checked all my points where I engaged the Taliban, and none of them were engaging. Checked the guy that I just took out, he wasn't engaging. So the only place I didn't check was where the scout was earlier, where I did 9 shots. So I looked up there, and there were 2 Taliban with a PKM machine gun firing down into where my lads were. So what I'd done, I fired 1 shot. I knew where I was shooting because I'd shot there in the morning. So this is sort of early afternoon now, and I took my first shot. And as I took my first shot, I missed. Then I took a second shot, and as the guy stood up, I hit him, and I hit him in the chest or the side, I can't remember now. And he went down. And then I fired my third shot to get the second guy. And as I fired my third shot, I moved my rifle over and fired my fourth shot. So now I've got 2 bullets in the air at the same time. And the bullet flight from my rifle to the target was 6 seconds. So as it flew through the air, my third one missed, but as the guy stood up with a machine gun, I hit him in the stomach and he fell down. And the only reason we knew where we hit him is because we tried to, every time you engage a target and take a target out, you want to collect their weapon system to stop it getting integrated and sucked back into the Taliban hands. But it had already gone, and it turned out that these 2 guys were Taliban leaders, and they were quite high up. And they were orchestrating the attack as well. They were telling the guy with the radio what to do. And before I knew it, there was an Apache helicopter behind me, and he was quite low, and they always work in pairs. So there was another one knocking around, and I told him where we were getting engaged from, and he GPS'd it at 2,775 meters, 475 meters away. So just over 1.5 miles, which I didn't care at the time. I'd just done my job. I'd done what I had to do, and I extracted my lads out the irrigation field. And then the patrol who had the injured and the dead, they got extracted out. And the mission, I wouldn't say was a success, but the patrol got out safely, or for what it could do anyway.
Yeah. It's an incredible story, and on so many levels. And obviously, the fact they got out safely is got to be the main thing at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, it's sort of a very, for want of a better term, it's a very protective role that you're in. With protecting a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, because you give Overwatch, they rely on you. Do you know what I mean? They rely on you to. You're their eyes at the end of the day, because you've got higher ground than they have. All they can see is what they can see. You can see a whole different thing from the angle you're at. So,
different perspective on it, yeah. Before we move past this, is that the last thing that I think is relevant to mention is obviously with the bullets and the rounds that you were using it. Again, when I was researching this, I came across that it's not I'm by no means a gun expert, by the way, but it's by no means the type of caliber that would be regularly used, or in a lot of other situations like this, people are using a much higher caliber, a much larger bullet, basically, in simple terms. So with that, I mean, was that something you were mindful of when you engaged those targets, or what are your thoughts?
No, not at all. My rifle itself and the rounds that I used, from the distance, it's only they've measured up to 1,500 meters. So 1,500 meters, minus is where you engage targets from. So when I lasered it and my laser binos and the lines come up, then you're beyond your capability of that rifle system itself. But if I didn't do it, if I didn't try it, I wouldn't have saved lives. I had to give it a go, and I was off the scale. So basically you had the crosshairs itself. I was aiming right down the bottom. So I wasn't even on the crosshairs because it was out the capability of the rifle itself. Now, don't get me wrong, my record has been broken by 50 cals, and the 50 cal can go 4Ks plus, and it's a powerful weapon system. Mine's a 338 with a distance of 1,500 meters, and I broke the rule, so I still hold it for that small caliber, and hasn't been broken yet.
Yeah.
And plus, I did it twice.
Yeah. Well, no matter how people look at it, it is an amazing achievement, and it is something. At the time, you didn't know it was a world record, though. So, how did you actually find out? Or, I mean, did this come?
So basically, when we went back to camp, when the tour had finished, you get a medals parade to get your Afghan medal, and all your family comes down and everything. And there was a reporter there, and they all get cleared by the MOD and all that. So you can talk freely to this reporter. And I was talking to him about my stories, and because he was interested in what we got up to when we was in Afghan. He said, "Do you realise you broke Rob Furlong's record?" And I said, "Not really. I wasn't really interested at the time, And he said, "Yeah, well, you broke the world record." And I said, "Oh, right, okay." And anyway, the day went on without a hitch. Really nice day with the families. And then on the Sunday, I opened the papers, and it was just full of me breaking the world record. And I didn't even know it went in the papers until we got told by the reporter it's in the papers. So it was quite of a shock, And my wife said to me, "I've got a bad feeling about this. This doesn't seem right." And everyone was battering her down, saying, let him enjoy it. And my wife she's got a good sixth sense, Tanya has. And she said there's something not right. And she was right, because we started getting death threats after that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to touch on that because, as I mentioned before, some people will know the story, but for anyone that doesn't know the story, you were never supposed to be in this way sort of exposed, or that was never supposed to. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Supposed to be leaked, and it was sort of a major sort of security thing and a major threat to you and your family. And I'd like to touch on that as well, because obviously, even though we've been talking a lot about yourself and your side, obviously there's a lot of other people that come into this. So even when you're actually on tour, obviously there's all the other people's lives as well. In this case, there's you and your family when this was exposed. So what was life like, at that point after this came out and after you started getting this? I mean, did you have to sort of leave the area? Did you try and plan ways of?
We went into hiding for 3 years, and it was a nightmare because you come off. You just lose all track of sense who you are, really, and you just get. Yeah, it was difficult to say. It was difficult. 3 years are difficult,
Yeah. It's really something, and again, it's something to touch on. And as I said at the beginning, some of these things would be more difficult than others, to sort of go back to for you, and I do respect that. I'm sort of moving around time a little bit here, but that's fine with me. When it comes to the incident where you mentioned about being blown up, and obviously this is also quite well known, and I know I'd like to give that a mention as well, because obviously I'm not going to go into every story of your career here, because if people want to know the full story, they should read the book. So I'm going to say to everyone, listen, everyone watching, read the book, guys, because it's really good. But what I would say is, so this is why it's sort of almost like the highlights, and then it should drive into, people want to know the full story, read the book. But in terms of, this is another aspect of your career that's quite well known, and you mentioned this about the PTSD and everything like that, which I do want to touch on, not to dwell on anything negative here, but just for the purposes of helping people know they're not alone and other people going through that sort of experience. I've got that sort of mindset to it rather than just, probing you for something that's bound to be not very nice to sort of talk about. But giving it a touch on that day, with the again, when I was researching this, I read it and I was just amazed. I was going to say blown away, then it's not a very good term for it, but I was just amazed by what happened and everything like that. So, can you share with us in your own words, same thing as the world record? It's not a really specific about this particular event, but just that day, what happened, your recovery, just your own words of that experience, please.
Yeah. So it was the same again. The mission was going into the green zone. So through Afghan itself, you have a green belt through Helmand province, and they call that the green zone. And everything else is desert and crappy sand and everything, but you have this green belt, and hence the green zone. And there was a patrol going into the green zone. It's quite thick in there, and it goes for miles. And it was a job for this patrol to clear out the Taliban and see when they get engaged, see how far they've pushed back the Taliban. And it was my job to give Overwatch again. So I gave Overwatch all day. The patrol went in without a hitch at all. I engaged a few targets that were going down onto the patrol, and I spotted them before the patrol did. So it sort of like prevented a gunfight, really. And so I done my job. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and we were patrolling back on vehicles. And when it gets dark there, it gets dark because there's no ambient light, so it is pitch fucking black, And I made a decision that I didn't want to go for this village. I wanted to go around the outskirts of the village, and my lead vehicle stopped, and I jumped out of my vehicle, ran over to him, and I said, "Look," he said, "I've got a bad feeling about this. I don't feel confident enough to do it." So as a sergeant, you take the bull by the horns, and I made a decision, said, "I will lead, follow me." And I've told the rest of my call signs to follow me as well. And as I drove around the outskirts of this village, I hit a 30-kilo anti-tank mine, IED, on the right side of my vehicle, where my driver wore most of it with his legs, which was horrendous. And then I got blown out of the vehicle to the left-hand side, which I broke both my arms, I broke my wrists, and the rest of that sort of like history, really. I got Kazivak'd out, back to Bastion, and then I got taken home via Kandahar, and then 6 weeks in casts, and then they sort of promised me I wouldn't get sent back out, but they took the cast off, went to see the doctor, the physio. They made me do 10 press-ups and sent me back out.
Well, that's quite an experience in so many ways, and it's amazing how you came through it. But it must have been horrific for the people involved, obviously. When you touched on this about the PTSD side of things, and that was when this wall of ice, which is a good term for it, sort of shattered. And again, like I said before, I don't want to dwell on this for any sort of negative reason. It's only to sort of show both sides of what goes on, and to show people that they're not alone if there's other people out there. So, what was the difference afterwards in terms of it? Is it sort of like in a flashback type of range? Is it that you couldn't compartmentalize what you were doing anymore? You get where I'm coming from with.
Yeah. It's weird. I didn't notice it. Mm-hmm. I thought I was still all right. My wife noticed it first. My anger, being on my own all the time, feeling depressed, feeling down, crying. I couldn't stop crying all the time. Anxiety, didn't want to go out, didn't want to leave the house, stuff like that. And she noticed it first, but I thought, nah, it's just because I just had a shit time on tour, but it went on and on and on and on. And it wasn't long after that the army noticed it as well. And then I got called into the medical officer's office, and basically said, "We think you got PTSD. We need to get you checked out." So they sort of like checked me out. I I had severe PTSD, and then from there, after doing 23 years, it took me half an hour to get kicked out.
Yeah, it's quite something this as well that I know you've touched on. Well, actually, more than touched on, and you've been quite outspoken about the treatment that you received not being very good, which is well, it's terrible, really. And again, when I was researching for this, I was shocked. But in terms of this as well, you've also been very open about some of your struggles since then with suicidal thoughts and things like that. Is that something that you struggle with now, if you don't mind me asking this, or is that
Yeah, I
something?
suffer from suicidal isolation. So I think of it all the time. Think of it in the mornings, think of it in the evenings. I'm constantly thinking of it all the fucking time, you know. Um, and it's part of my trauma, and I see a therapist with it as well. And we do a thing called EMDR, which is he sort of waves his finger in front of me. I follow it. He takes me to each scenario that's distressing for me, and he brings me back out of it. And it's been helping a lot, but yeah, the suicidal thoughts, it stays there. It's a horrible thing to have in your head all the time, but it's part and parcel of the PTSD, I'm afraid.
Mm. Yeah, it is. It must be a terrible thing to live with. But then again, it sounds like you have some great support, from your wife and from your therapist and from other people. So I think that's got to be key. Is sort of not facing it alone. And that you have their support. And obviously, it's worth to give them a mention as well because of the way they're helping you. So that's good. But it
Yeah.
must be, it must be tough. So moving back into a few lighter things, because like I say, I don't want to dwell on that because it can't be easy to think about, let alone talk about. So I respect that. Obviously, I'm moving into the last few things now. Anyway, with writing your book, getting that out there, and getting your story out there and setting the record straight and everything like that. What was the inspiration to actually write that? Because even though obviously I know the book, in terms of where it initially came from, was it a form of healing for you to get it out there? Was it more to set the record straight with certain things? What was
Yeah. To set the record straight, really, because everyone had my shot as I was laying down. Everyone had my shot like I was doing this and doing that and doing that. And I just wanted to set it straight. But I just couldn't write a book, one chapter about the shot. So I had to be about my whole life, my experiences of whole life and the tours that I've been on. And it sort of worked out quite well, because when I took the shot, I was stood up and on the wall, stood up on a wall, or leant against the wall, should I say. And so, yeah, so like you said, I just wanted to put the record straight, really. And the book was a big success,
It was indeed. And did that surprise you? That people
Not
love
at all. Not at all. It's nerve-wracking getting a book out there because you always think of, is it going to be crap? People going to buy it and stuff like that. But it's still selling now, and it is a good read. It's an easy read and it's a good read. So it's like you said, if you want to get to know me, get the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% say that to anyone watching or listening. This is this is sort of like a taster almost, and when you get into the book, obviously it gets into the real story and the real Craig, because it is your own words at the end of the day. So the last couple of things then to move into, because we've covered some really good stuff here to mention. I'd also give this a mention. I mean, we're moving out of sort of linear time with these last couple of questions into this happened and then this happened, but just the last couple of things is you have also said, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, about some of your men, while you were on tour, not necessarily getting the credit that they deserved because of the amount of media attention that was focused solely on yourself. And even though we've talked extensively obviously about yourself, because that's the main aspect of this, I feel leaving that out would be wrong. So even though I'm asking this at the end and it's not necessarily in a sort of the chronology of the story, but obviously there's times when you've mentioned that they didn't get the credit they deserve. So I'd like to give a chance for you to say anything that you'd like to say, and I know this is quite a big question, quite a broad thing. It's not really a narrow thing. Anything that you'd like to say about how you feel about that now, giving them a mention, just um, anything you'd like to say, because it would, do you know what I mean? It wouldn't be fair to sort of focus on just
It
on your.
wasn't, when the medals parade thing happened, it was like I thought it would be all about my lads. I didn't, and I got quite pissed off that it was just about me, me, me. And I've always said that I'm not a one man army. I'm not a lone wolf. Behind me, I've got support. Behind me, I've got a good bunch of lads, and we were very close. And that's all. And they deserve the credit, because if it wasn't for my spotter, if it wasn't for my driver, if it wasn't for my gunner, I doubt if I'd be here now, because two eyes, if you've got six eyes, are better than two on a vehicle, and for the rest of the lads as well, I couldn't ask for a better bunch of blokes to go on tour with. And do you know what? I'd go on tour with them again. That's how much I rely on them.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well worth giving them a mention, and I felt very strongly, because obviously before researching this, I mean, when I researched it, I go in depth and really start digging. Whereas obviously I'd heard of your story before that, and I just for some reason assumed that they'd sort of covered all of it. And when I came across the fact they hadn't, and you felt that way, I thought, we really need to just mention that. So that's the reason. And pretty much the last thing is the same type of thing, but for other people that support you in your life. So obviously you've mentioned about your wife supporting you, your therapist, and so on. You do obviously have quite a social media presence as well, and people seem to be quite supportive on there. I hope most of them are, sending you positive messages and things. So like I said at the beginning, with this, there'll be people where this is their first time they've heard your story, but there'll be a lot of other people where they know a bit about you. So for those people that do take the time to support you, whether it's up close and personal or whether it's from distance, if you like, over social media, do you have anything you'd say to them? Do you have any words that you'd sort of say to them to give them a shout out and a quick mention as well?
No, just thanks for everyone that follows me. I try to speak to every single one person that follows me. I try and speak to every single one of them, and majority of them have got mental health issues, and I try and talk to them, give them strength and give them courage. Me and my wife sit down and go through all of it, because I can't take the credit for it. My wife helps me as well. She's a big support and big advocate for mental health as well. And, and people that I advise people about snipering, the young lads that want to join the army, I advise them, and I advise things about mental health. I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a supporter, social worker, but I'm going through PTSD. So maybe a little bit of my support will help them. And that's what I try and stem for. And I've opened a survival school, Maverick Survival School. And some of the people that come on there have got mental health issues. And my therapist comes down and sits with us and talks to them. So it's like a double whammy, really. I teach them survival, plus they're getting a bit of counselling as well. So that helps, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's all about helping and putting back into the community of the mental health big bubble, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you do some great work with that. And I really do think that your life and your story, it does make a difference. It really does make a difference to a lot of people. And that's the positive aspect of it, because you've been through highs and lows. And, I don't know at the end of the day if some of what you've been through feels like a blessing or a curse or both. But at the end of the day, it does. I think it does have a positive impact on a lot of other people, that they know they can get through, some of what they're going through. People who served and otherwise,
Yeah.
Mental health, really.
Because there is different sides, like stuff that I need to concentrate on. There is civilian PTSD and there is army PTSD, and it's took me a long time to realise that they're not the same. It's like when you see somebody being knocked over by a car, I used to think, why have they got PTSD? Because they've been knocked over by a car. But then you got to think, well, military is different than civilian. Now I understand it, and now I can relate to some people that do struggle with PTSD, because it's still in that mental health bubble.
Absolutely, yeah, it's amazing work, and I've got a lot of respect for it. So the the last thing for me to say is just pretty much like I said at the beginning. It's just big thank you for your time, and thank you for making the time, and thank you for sharing everything you shared. I will say to anyone watching or listening, obviously check Craig out on social media. As he said, he's very accessible on social media. Check out the book as well for anyone that's not read it. Available on Amazon, available on all your usual bookshops, online bookshops, and so on. So check those out. But yeah, a big thank you for your time, mate. I do genuinely really appreciate it.
No worries, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.